lovely bunch of experts on cybersecurity operations, threat intelligence in the world of artificial intelligence. Really, really excited to talk to everyone on this panel here. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly introduce the panelists, but I definitely want the panelists themselves to give an introduction as well. So we have Alex Lansing from Strike Ready, Bob Pratt from Mixmode, and then we also have Jonathan Jonathan from Silent Push. Go ahead, guys. Why don't you guys give a quick intro on your guys, and then we can get started on the panel.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off the top. So yeah, Alex Lansteen, quick background. So I spent almost 15 years at FireEye. So I got to see, going from a small company to becoming a large disruptive security company, and then on the backside getting bought up by private equity. After that, I went to Facebook, where I worked on the counter espionage team, protecting against Southeast Asian threats on platform. And now I've joined Strike Ready to help drive modern security operations and really just empower defenders.
Thanks for joining, Alex. Excited to have you on.
I guess I can go next. Bob Pratt. I'm the SVP of product for Mixmode, where we're building sort of an AI solution to the problem of finding threats in your data. I've been doing security stuff way too long. I didn't have any white hair when I started. The places I've worked at startups my whole career. The ones that you might have heard of would include Splunk. I was in charge of their SIEM product for about 7 years. Prior to that, I was the VP of product for ArcSight for about 5 years, building out their SIM back when SIEM was a whole new idea. And then earlier in my career, I was one of the first employees at a startup called VeriSign. So we created SSL and HTTPS.
Awesome. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Jonathan Peister. I originally started out in a career focused on all things China before transitioning into cybersecurity, initially actually at VeriSign, where Bob worked. After that, I spent over 5 years at Data I was leading research and development focused on cybersecurity and the intersection of cyber and AI. And earlier this summer, I joined Silent Push, where I'm a product manager leading our integrations and partnerships, really trying to give our customers more and more access to our data wherever they need it.
Excited to hear more. Thank you, guys. And I will add that I was actually a consumer and user of VeriSign certificates back in the day.
Awesome.
As a PKI engineer myself in my early days, so very familiar with VeriSign certificates. So with that, let's get started. So let me just kind of give you guys some background. So really, the topic of today is security operations. But what we want to do is we want to discuss security operations in a different context, in a different light. And really, it's around advancing security operations, right? And it's this conversation is a pretty normal conversation. Happens to be a pretty conversation that's continuously happening across numerous organizations. But we're going to take a little bit of a different twist here. We really want to talk specifically around threat intelligence and how what organizations are doing in today's world, and where we see the future going with threat intelligence and with AI, more importantly, generative AI, as we move into advancing security operations. So just to kick things off, what I want to do is I want to kind of just start off with some basic questions, and then we can dive deeper into some other questions that may be a little bit harder and make you guys think a little bit, right? We have a really good panel here, so I want to make sure that the discussions are worthwhile and impactful for our audience. So just a quick question to all you guys. What made you do this panel with us?
It honestly seemed like just an interesting topic, and I like talking about this sort of stuff. Believe it or not, I guess the advantage of living in Silicon Valley is that I get to go to cocktail parties and have conversations about network security and PKI and the like. Maybe because I live in a weird neighborhood, but I just enjoy it. So the opportunity to sort of just chat with some other knowledgeable folks and share my biases and preconceived assumptions is always fun.
Okay, nice.
Bob, I'm happy to jump in there as well. For myself, it really comes down to two things. The first is my previous job. I really had an amazing opportunity where I got to work with dozens of AI researchers and really got to work with them to understand how we can apply the technology they were developing to the cybersecurity research and development that I was responsible for. And the other thing is really just the opportunity to network with some other folks operating in this space, really to share their ideas and how we can take these new technologies and make ourselves safer.
Yeah, so a little bit of both of those. But being back at a startup, we can get a little bit laser focused on the things that we do and the things that we do well. And I'm just really excited to hear about what other companies, small, medium size, are doing that are sort of tangential to what we do in security operations. I'm going to more conferences now, but it's certainly the networking aspect of it is nice to hear from other peers in the industry.
I can definitely relate, Alex. Definitely relate with that one. So let's get into one of the questions. Number one question, right? And again, this is everyone has challenges, and so speaking to security operations, aside from, I'm not going to ask the normal question of like, oh, what's the major challenge for security analysts, because everyone knows it's alert fatigue and obvious things, right? Let's take the approach of like, what are some challenges that you see today in today's even more mature security operations? Like, what do you see that are challenges in not just regular security operations? I don't want the normal answers of alert fatigue, but in mature security operations.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, no problem. So one thing that I've noticed that's interesting, silent push, one of the things that we do best is enable our users to threat hunt. And one thing that we've been surprised about talking to some even relatively mature SOC operations is they don't necessarily have that much bandwidth to do proactive threat hunting. And that's not necessarily something that they have as a core focus of their operations and their training of their SOC operators. So that's one challenge that comes in mind, in addition to, of course, the obvious alert fatigue one that you highlighted.
Okay. I guess for me, it would be that I would have thought that the swivel chair problem would have been solved, where large organizations, when they're triaging alerts, the notion of a single pane of glass has been sold to people for so long, whether it's in SIM or SOAR or XDR or you name the product. I would have thought that it would exist, like that you wouldn't be opening multiple tabs, multiple windows, and cut and pasting at mature shops. And I haven't found that to be true in most places. So I guess that's been the challenge that surprised me the most.
It's very true. Swivel chair effect has been like, it's been a word that's been used for like ever since I've been doing this stuff, and even on the other side, on the vendor side, right? It's just still there for sure. Yeah. Bob,
I was just going to add the other thing that I like about it is that there's always new challenges, because unlike almost any other area of tech where you're trying to do something better, faster, cheaper, in security, we always have to remember there's bad guys on the other side. So you're having to actually outthink other people. And to me, that makes it a little unique and frankly kind of fun, because it keeps, I'm not just trying to do my database 5% cheaper than last year's or 3% faster, but I have to outthink the bad guys, and that keeps it entertaining. Mm-hmm. I think a new problem that I'm seeing SOC's running into is sort of an application of AI, is that generative AI is making it a lot easier to do, frankly, pretty convincing social hacking, generating emails and scripts and things that look in bulk, that look like they're coming from a real person rather than the sort of classic, completely misspelled Eastern European grammar phishing email. It's a lot easier to do really convincing ones now. And
I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to get into that. And just you're jumping the gun, like maybe 5 questions, 6 questions out. So we'll get to that, Bob. I appreciate the comments on that, though. So let's get into, the failures of security operations, right? From your experience, either whether it's from the vendor side or even if you've lived this yourself, right? What do you see as an absolute fail in SecOps? And maybe we compare, right? Like in the past, and then maybe comparing it today, right? And how do you see this improving? Does anyone want to take that one first?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so from my side, I don't know about the fail, but the thing that very, very mature shops have that less mature shops don't have is people dedicated on staff to do security engineering. So, some of the large organizations I go into, that they might have 2, 3, 4, 5 people who all they do is write Python scripts to make their tools work together. So I guess if there was a fail, it would be that like they're having to do that because a product doesn't exist to do integrations. Then the fail on the other side oftentimes is like when these people leave, that they've built this sort of homegrown, Frankenstein type product that then
Who takes it on?
it's not supportable. Like, who takes it on? Yeah.
Yeah, who takes it on? Who knows the secret sauce behind it, right? Like, and all of a sudden it just becomes someone new's problem. That's true. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I think another one is that another sort of fail in security. I don't know if it's just security ops, but security is that we still haven't solved the password problem. And by that, I mean, not only are we still using them, but people are still using really simple, easy to remember passwords. And it's not, I'm sure some of us are doing that. It's not just like, oh, it's the dumb user. It's security experts will still write down their passwords on a Post-it or use the same password on multiple accounts. And you'd think after 30, 40 years of trying to solve this problem, we might have a better approach, and we really don't.
Very true. Yeah. Or not even like, the digital version of Post-it notes is basically just having it like on Notepad, right, on your system, thinking that, oh yeah, it's on my system, it's locked and it's in a folder, it's fine. And
Yeah,
really not.
it's funny, like you talk about passwords, and we know mathematically that a passphrase, right, a 40 character string has more bits of entropy than an 8 character string with uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols. Like, we know that to be true. It's easier for a user to remember. It's harder for a computer to crack. And yet, how many websites do you go to that still, enforce these asinine password requirements?
Right, 8 characters and use an ampersand and all that, and then you write it down because you can't remember it. To your point, whereas a passphrase you actually could remember.
I think it's a good point. People in organizations, it's not always that they don't know what the right thing to do is or what to avoid is. Just the natural habits that we all have can lead to a lot of these SecOps fails.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, good. So yeah, I mean, what I'm taking here is, passwords is still a huge deal, and seems like it should have been already solved. Like, it's been so many years, but it's still an issue. So I'm gonna kind of pivot a little bit into a world that it's close to me and it's close to you guys too. I could tell. Threat intelligence, right? And I'll tell you guys, I've got a love-hate relationship with threat intelligence, and for obvious reasons, and it's a very broad topic. Tell me from your perspective how threat intelligence plays into security operations.
I agree with you. I think it's necessary. I mean, every SIM that I've built, you always have threat intel as a key feed into it, but it is a love-hate thing because I don't know that I've ever talked to a large enterprise customer that was really pleased with their threat intel, the actual quality of the feeds and everything. It's just a very hard problem to solve, to have something where you've got reliable and consistent basically data in the threat intel feed, and lots of people keep improving that, and it's good, but it's just never going to be perfect. And so I think that causes a lot of just dissatisfaction with the people actually using it at the end of the day. But there's no alternative. You have to have it.
For sure. And I think that quality piece that Bob was just speaking to is key, because ideally what you want from threat intelligence is to be able to make smart decisions about your defensive efforts. And if the intelligence that you're actually getting is inaccurate, you can introduce all sorts of new problems where you're blocking things that you shouldn't. You're triggering alerts that really shouldn't be distracting your teams. That quality is really critical. I think one thing that the industry struggles with a bit is so much threat intelligence is based on post-breach information, indicators of compromise. That's really why at Silent Push we really are trying to focus on identifying this threat intelligence as early as possible in its life cycle as the attackers are standing up their infrastructure.
Alex, I know you're chomping at this bit at the bit for this one too. So go ahead, man.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's the operational aspect of it is, you read these intelligence reports, and a lot of times they're just kind of interesting. If you're an analytical person, it might be interesting that the North Koreans are hacking into some Bitcoin miner or something like that to steal data or to steal Bitcoins, which then get used for, to feed their citizens. Like that's like an interesting concept. But so many of these reports like kind of fail the so what test. Like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Right? How do I know if one of my users, whether at home or, on an enterprise device, like, how quickly can I operationalize this? And part of that is, the lack of, a Rosetta Stone for all your devices. The other part of it, though, is the lack of the ability to go back and try to find things that your security vendors might have missed. Taking these threat intel reports, going from report to like, let me go look across my environment to see if I got any hits on these indicators of compromise that didn't generate alerts in the first place. Like that's a surprisingly difficult question
Yeah.
for enterprise to answer.
Yeah. It kind of leads me into the next question. So thank you, Alex, for like literally just leading into that. And so you kind of touched on a couple of things. You talked about the strategic side of things, where you got these curated reports, and you just want to do something within. How do you operationalize it? And then the other side is like the tactical indicators, right? And if you think about that, like that those two forms of intelligence, and they're very, very different, but they're still utilized in security operations, and you still have to use them, right? So from that perspective, right, when let's talk about like just tactical indicators for a second here. Like if you think about organizations and utilizing these millions and millions and even billions of indicators, how can an organization get operationalize it, and how can they get good at actually using those millions or billions of indicators? Is it possible?
Well, I don't know about billions of indicators, but certainly, lots of indicators on it in a time-bound manner. There's basically two ways, right? You can collect it ahead of time and store it in some sort of data lake or SIM or, full recording device, whatever you want to call it. And those devices are often expensive and kind of difficult to tune, and maybe the enterprise doesn't know exactly what they're looking for. Or you can do the federated model of, I'm going to go look across all my devices right now, leveraging whatever APIs they have available. And hopefully when I go and say, hey, do I have this hash on any endpoint? Have I seen this IP on my proxy? Have I seen this sender email address on my O365? Hopefully those tools are mature enough that, you're able to reliably run those searches in an API driven manner, right? There are some tools that you could do a search in the GUI, but you can't do it via an API or maybe vice versa. So I think speccing out your environment ahead of time to understand which model you're going to go to, right? Are you going to pump it all to a data lake, or are you going to do federated search after the fact? Making those decisions ahead of time will really help out in operationalizing intel.
It's the speed and scale, really, right? And it really comes down to that. You're right. It's a lot of that is speed and scale. And if you
can't do a search, right? If I give you an IP and you can't search in your environment in less than tens of seconds, it's not. I don't want to say it's not worth doing, but like an analyst wants to run a search and get an answer within seconds or tens of seconds.
Yeah. Jonathan, you're nodding your head there. I'm curious if you had any other.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Alex's point about APIs and data connectivity. I think one thing that's really critical, if you have this massive amount of data, that you connect it to your tools that really enable you to filter it down as much as possible. And that's really, why I really enjoy my particular role, focusing on partnerships and integrations. You don't want your threat intelligence siloed in some threat intelligence product. It's critical that you're able to route that information to the tools that you have in your disposal to really filter it down, to get it down to a manageable level for you and your team.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's move on to the next question. We kind of talked about operationalizing tactical strategic indicators. I'd love to hear if anyone here, not everyone has to have a story, but if anyone here has a story where you saw an actual intelligence-led program that was working well, or even if it wasn't working well, it was working, and if there's any areas to improve, any anecdotal stuff or stuff that you could share, I'd love to hear that.
So I mean, I've got a number of these types of stories, but essentially when customers get breached by a particular threat actor, there's a natural, I don't want to say over-indexing, but like appropriate indexing to say, like, I'm going to watch this threat actor, and I'm going to try to track them through whatever intel reports I can, whatever my own research, I'm going to try to keep like a laser focus, like a persistent stare, they say, on a threat actor. And I've seen that work time and time again. You know, a lot of these threat actors are trackable if you're spending effort, either you or your intel provider. So in the case, it was actually a mutual customer of ours, Fayez, where we were tracking domain registrations, and it was like, you know, their domains were popping up in the same NS, you know, on the same name server, you know, time and time again. And like the patterns would go on for months. You know, it wasn't years, but it was certainly months.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be able to track what their targets were going to be if you had, you know, perfect visibility into the DNS. So we were able to see that they were going to target this particular hospital, and they were going to the lure was a publicly facing like file transfer tool, and you could see that spoof of like name of hospital dot. I don't want to say the name of the tool, but you could see them setting up that ahead of time, and we were just able to, you know, proactively put in defenses in their email and proxy infrastructure to swat it down before it even started.
Yeah, that's awesome. That actually gets into some of the areas of around, like, if you know, pre-attack, right? Like if you think about pre-attack matrix, and a lot of people don't talk about that. You know, everyone talks about like MITRE attack matrix, but what gets interesting is just what you just kind of touched on, Alex, is that the left side of the attack matrix. Like, and I think that a lot of organizations are not there yet to actually start looking at those early registrations of domains, and what happens after that, like, you know, SSL registrations, or like what are the things that are getting stood up ahead of time to know that, hey, this is going to happen, that's actually going to start falling into attack. But that's a very interesting topic, and I think I'm hoping that a lot of our audience can take advantage of actually looking at that. So that's just my take on that pre-attack side. Very interesting. Anyone else have anything, or do you want to? Should we move on? Okay. So moving on, right? So metrics, right? So I want to talk about metrics and SLAs, right? That becomes a big deal, especially in security operations. From my side too, like, you know, seeing and being an operator myself back in the day, and also kind of seeing how other operators have worked. And God, I feel bad. I always feel so bad for our analysts, right? The analyst community and security analysts out there that have these just insane triage SLAs of just churning and burning through stuff. Like, you know, I've seen anything from just a few minutes, usually just a few minutes. I haven't seen any SLA that's been like hours, right? It's always in security operations, like time is of the essence. Let's just get going. Talking about those SLAs, what do you see a successful program, and like how quickly should you be responding, and with actual validity and accuracy, right? And you know, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a tough one. I mean, because my main answer is it depends, because it really does depend what type of threat you've got or what thing you've detected, how fast it's practical to respond, and also how fast it's important to. Because in a lot of ways, it's like, you know, a fire alarm going off, and it could be because somebody just overheated something on the stove, or it could be because the entire attic is consumed with flames and you need to get out of the house right away. And so I think it's hard to have a single answer for that. But I totally agree. The big issue, I think, isn't how fast you respond, but the sort of ongoing pressure, the continuous stress of always trying to respond really quickly. And I think that's why we see, you know, there's a lot of turnover in SOC analysts, because it's a stressful as heck job.
Yeah, agree. And sharing, and just I love kind of giving my analogies wherever I can. If you think about Ring, right? I'm sure, like, I've got a Ring, and I honestly, like, I feel like a Ring response is like, it's 2 minutes. I feel like it's not fast enough. Like Ring, 2 minutes, so much can happen before like they actually trigger the response unit and have police come out to your home, right? And so much can happen in that. Same thing in security operations. It's like, but at the same time, you got to keep going. You got to make sure that you're responding to the right things. And if you're just you're doing analysis and you quickly turn things and it's not right, or if it's, you know, you miss something, then all of a sudden there's a huger issue, right?
So, yeah, or to go with your analogy, if they were sending the cops out after, say, 10 seconds every time, a lot of those places where you don't need the cops to show up, and
yeah,
they go crazy.
exactly the point, right? There would be way too many false positives. I would love it, but I don't think they would like it at all.
Yeah, so I think that's the real problem. It's more not so much the SLA, is just that pressure for the SOC, I think, is the real thing that it'd be great if we could all fix somehow with tech.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
we're gonna, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, you were talking about metrics, and like, one of the metrics that SOC analysts would love to have that they don't seem to have today is the what did you do today metric when things aren't on fire. People always talk about everything's on fire all the
Yeah.
time. Like, well, it's not really true these days. I mean, that it was probably more true 10 years ago. So like having like at the ready, a daily digest of like what you did and how long it took to run each query, each search, each pivot, each enrichment, how long it took you to do each one. And if you had automation, like, because what that does, it'll show you like, oh, our Splunk is really slow, or we don't have this Office 365 license, or if we're collecting the data off our endpoints instead of doing a live search, here's all the time we could have saved. So those metrics in the slow times are super useful. They'll pay dividends down the road.
That's a really good point. I like that one a lot. Yeah, it's often missed, right? It's just like it's one of those things where back when I was doing a lot of SOC type of stuff, it was just like you're just paranoid and you're just working on like, oh, there's something wrong. I got to keep going and looking for stuff, and then you start to get into hunting mode because there's something wrong and this is like not normal. But you have to take a step back and actually look at that, which you just said, Alex, around metrics and how do you kind of improve upon your processes, et cetera. So I like that a lot.
And
Anything else?
yeah, really quickly on Alex's point there with the metrics, I also think the real value of really tracking time saved is it can help you argue for additional tools, additional automation, more personnel, more resources that you need to be able to save more time and have more efficient SOC efforts. So that's really, I think, a great point by Alex.
Yeah.
That time saved is a critical metric to be measuring.
Yeah, it actually goes in Alex, you're a little ahead of it. You kind of answered the next question. It was going to be more about advancing and improving SecOps and intelligence-led SecOps. It's basically an answer right there on metrics refinements. And anything else that anyone wants to add to that, or else we can move on?
Yeah, I mean, like, my story I always tell around SecOps is, your boss read some report in the New York Times, could have been from a threat intel vendor, and she says like, did we get hit by this thing? If we did get hit by this thing, would our tools have detected it? And then if our tools had detected it, what would the SOC analysts have done? So getting SOCs to that maturity level is, that's the win, right? When you can do that in an automated fashion,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you've made it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think a lot of times it's even if you can answer to get to where you just said, Alex, you're already ahead of the game. I think a lot of times it's your boss saying, hey, I saw this story about this new hack. Did it hit us? And just being able to answer if it hit you or not is already hard for a lot of people.
You're right.
Maybe I'm too cynical.
So talking about cynical, and we will get into that a little bit now too, because the world of AI. So Bob, you had started to talk about AI, and so there is of course on both sides of this, right? So we'll talk about that too, right, and how AI gets how AI is growing. So just before I get into like that topic, just to kind of put some context around this, I was doing some research around this, how quickly generative AI has grown in general, and specifically, I'm going to call out ChatGPT, right? So, you guys may have seen this, and many of our audience may or may not know this, but if you look at the amount of time it took ChatGPT specifically to onboard 100 million users, right? That amount was just alarmingly fast. It was about 2 months where OpenAI had 100 million users already on their platform, right? So it kind of shows the velocity and veracity of how quickly that happened. But if you compare that back to like just not even AI tools, but just other ones out there, like there's Telegram and Snapchat and Instagram and social channel like WhatsApp, and all of those are in anywhere from like it was a year to 5. What was it? I think it was like 5 to 7. Actually, yeah, 5 to 7 years it took to get that many users onboarded. So obviously AI is here, generative AI specifically is here, and it came very fast. Like I think it was faster than it was faster than anything that we had ever imagined, right? And so considering that now, and knowing these statistics, let's take a step back, and I want to see, I want to make sure the audience is aware, right, of not just like ChatGPT, but just kind of explain the difference between like AI and generative AI, right? So a little bit of a softball for all of you guys here. Who wants to take that one? What's the difference between AI and generative AI?
I think the amusing thing will be how different each of our answers are likely to be.
Yeah.
I can jump in on that one. Yeah. So really, so with generative AI is really focused on using typically very large models to generate content, as the name suggests, whether it be text, audio, video. Whereas with regular AI or other forms of AI, rather, it's not necessarily in the focus on generation. Oftentimes, it's focused on detecting information. To give you a specific example of that, in my previous job, a lot of the AI applications that we were using for cybersecurity were focused on using computer vision technology, things like optical character recognition to be able to read text and interpret it, or logo recognition to determine if a phishing page is targeting a particular brand. These are more forms of detection AI rather than the generative AI that is, very much in the zeitgeist now, with ChatGPT being the prime example.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think of generative AI as being specifically around creating content based on more or less predictive models that you said train on large amounts of data and go, when we see a sentence like this, the next sentence should look like this based on that experience. I think, that's how I differentiate the two anyway. There's a generative being a subset of AI with that particular focus.
Alex, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree with what they're saying. For us, AI, there's the old saying, right? AI is a combination of inference and learning, right? So you have a block of thousands of images that are of a cat. You've extracted all sorts of features about the cat, about the whiskers and the ears and the color and the fur and all that. And then you feed it another image. It's able to identify as a cat, and there's this feedback loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feedback loop is part of the learning mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. And you're kind of touching on other forms of AI, right, Alex? And just for the audience, I'm just kind of demystify a little bit more and break this apart for anyone that isn't aware, right? What Alex is kind of touching on is those different forms like deep learning, right? And there's also other forms of AI, like there's machine learning, there's deep learning, there's LLMs, large language models, etc. Right? So if I don't know if anyone has any more insight or wants to talk about these, but there is so much to unfold and unpack there when we get into that world. So let's talk about the application of this a little bit, right? Like, how do you see this fitting in? Can generative AI fit into the SOC model, and if so, how do you see that fitting into that model?
I guess to be a contrarian, I think at the moment it's, in terms of how you could use it for the defender, for the SOC personnel, I think it's actually extraordinarily dangerous, because a lot of what generative AI, and I'm thinking of LLM-based solutions like ChatGPT right now. I did not coin this term, someone else did, but I shamelessly stole it. It's kind of automated mansplaining. In other words, it gives you a very confident sounding, very official sounding answer that may or may not have any correlation with reality. So in a security center, if you're using, say, generative AI to recommend what to do about a particular threat, it'll give you a very confident answer. To solve this attack or to solve this threat, take these steps. And say 80% of the time, it'll be right. But 20% of the time, it'll give you steps that either don't help the problem or even make it worse. And you won't know what's the 20% and what's the 80%. That's the part that scares me, is people adopting it right now and trusting it unconditionally when they just shouldn't yet. It's not there.
You're right. It almost feels like when it's one of those things where you read it and it just shows like it just looks like it's just they're confident. AI is confidently saying these things. It must be the source of truth, right?
Unless you're an expert, you won't know which of those is wrong. And if you're an expert, you don't need it telling you because you already know the answer.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. So piggybacking on that, the confidently wrong problem, which now they call hallucination. This term hallucination.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely some great use cases with trusted LLMs, in the sense that like if you're building this based on your own knowledge bases, you can trust that your own internal data is correct.
Mhm.
But it's just like an anecdote. There's this Mac software Jamf, JAMF, and I wasn't sure if it's pronounced Jamf or JamF or I don't know. I hadn't heard somebody pronounce it right, so I just Googled, how do you pronounce Jamf? And Google's, AI engine parsed the Jamf website, and some guy on their like community forum said, "Oh, Jamf, it's with a soft J. It's actually pronounced Yamf." And they were making a joke, right? That's a funny joke. But Google came back and said, "Oh, it's pronounced Yamf. That's how you say it." I was like, "Oh,
Wow,
it
that's
took
a
me a
great
second."
example. Great
So,
example.
you have to like you're talking about, Bob. Like, unless you're an expert. I mean, AI is great at summarizing data. So if I say, what do I need to know about this threat, right? Who's talking about this CVE? Hey, given this payload, can you generate a likely snort rule, a likely YAR rule? But if you're not able to look at that and do some validation on top of it, you got to be careful. One of the really cool applications I have seen is automated parser writing. So like this is like when I saw this in AI, I was like, okay, this might be a real thing. Where like just taking feeds, like syslog feeds from a device. I don't want to say what device it was. Syslog feeds from a device and just automatically creating a Python parser. And when the feed was broken, like suggesting like automated fixes to like zero out the chunks that were obviously broken. I was like, oh wow, that's like a 95% solution. That's really neat.
That
Alex,
is neat.
you actually hit on, it's like a perfect transition to something I was going to add here. Totally share the concerns about these hallucinations and how difficult it is to verify in real time that what you're getting from one of these models is accurate. One use case though that I've been experimenting with that can to some extent mitigate that is using some of these generative AI tools like a ChatGPT to aid in the development of custom tools like the parser that Alex mentioned. For myself, a use case that I've been experimenting with a bunch is using a tool called Streamlit, developed by Snowflake, to develop custom data apps using silent push APIs with user interfaces, and doing so with very minimal code, very minimal Python skill on my part, but being able to give a tool with a user interface to one of our analysts, someone else on our team, to a customer in a very short period of time. The value of these coding use cases is that to some extent, you can test if the suggestion you get from the ChatGPT model is accurate by running the code, executing it, and seeing if it actually functions as you intended. So code in some ways can be a little bit better to get around those hallucinations, at least for small scripts rather than kind of a large production app. I'm not suggesting you build an entire SaaS platform using ChatGPT. But for those use cases like Alex was talking about with a parser, I think there's a lot of value.
Yeah, where you can validate the answer that it's giving you, or the code is correct afterwards. Yeah, then I think I agree, it's awesome. It's a great shortcut. It's where you have to blindly rely on what it tells you and just hope it's correct is the scary bit.
100%.
So yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to move along a little bit quicker right now, and just to kind of play devil's advocate, and maybe we won't discuss this, but this is for another day, and just kind of making sure the audience is also aware of this, right? With the onset of ChatGPT, there have been, and I'm sure you guys might be aware of these, right? Other generative AI tools that are used in malicious manner, and also been other bad actors have created their own versions of ChatGPT like tools for their own benefit of targeting customers and targeting various different organizations. And specifically, I'll call them out. One of them is Worm GPT. The other one is Fraud GPT. And these threat actors are actually using that specifically. It's this focus on just using them as their own tool sets, right? And aside from having this conversation, maybe we can just talk about what how you see this playing in, maybe what operations tools and technologies do you see working that could be in response to this nature of what's occurring now with the adversaries?
Yeah, that's what I
Or
was kind of getting at the when I jumped ahead at the beginning is, yeah, the AI strengthening the attacker almost more than the defender right now is I think a real risk. Also, all the
yeah,
deep fake technologies, like you can fake voice tones and stuff now in real time. So I could call up somebody and pretend to be you and have it redo my voice kind of live to sound like you, and that's also scary. Um, I'm not sure what the best answer for an attacker is, to be honest. I'm hoping one of these guys has one.
it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, yeah, when you talk about calling the help desk and you're able to use a deep fake type voice, or you do video chats. A lot of help desks now require video chats, and the concept of being able to do deep fake video is pretty scary. So, I don't want to say that going back to in person to reset your password is what we're going to have to do, but I wouldn't be shocked if it goes in that direction. But like what you're saying, the ability for threat actors to scale. I think that the AI threat actor concern is like hyped in a lot of places, right? AI is not going to help them build a missile or something. Watch that be wrong.
Yeah,
But
right.
where it really helps them scale out is in phishing, vishing, like smishing, like all the ways that like they initiate a conversation with you for a day, a couple of days. Like that scale is just it's blowing up. And in terms like now one person can run thousands of conversations instead of like a real human having to run a lot of these like smishing type scams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also threat actors are early adopters, and social engineering is just a ideal application of this type of technology. Doesn't mean there aren't some good things that we can do with this in cybersecurity, but I agree with Bob and Alex that there's definitely some concerns that we need to keep our eye on.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the what in-person password reset maybe, but it does make, the security approaches where they emphasize something you have as well as what you know become more and more important. Having some sort of a physical token, like maybe we'll see secure ID token sales jump up again or something, but rather than just something that the help desk can reset over the phone, it is the inconvenience if you lose it, but the benefit of a dedicated physical thing, a YubiKey or whatever.
Good. This is a great conversation. We keep going, but I'm going to kind of last question I just want to ask, and this has been an awesome conversations here around across the board, right? Let's just, if you guys don't mind, can you take a minute just to talk about what you're doing? And very curious, and just for the audience, just what you're doing today, your own respective company in just a battle against cybercrime.
Sure. I mean, I'll go first quickly. So I'm at a startup called Mixmode, and we're basically applying AI, specifically unsupervised machine learning technology, to analyze the large and ever-growing volumes of security data and try and surface threats that the security team is missing. Not because they're not good, not because they don't know what they're doing, because there's never enough hours in the day to run every search and write every rule in your SIM. So I'm basically trying to help solve the problem that I spent the last 15 years creating at ArcSight and Splunk.
Nice. Thanks, Bob. Alex?
So at Strike Ready, so we make a SaaS-based platform. We're not shipping boxes anymore, right? FireEye, we shipped boxes for 15 years. I'm glad those days are dwindling. But so we make a SaaS-based platform. The core of the platform is we have integrations for 400 different security products. If we don't have yours, we'll do it for you for free. And then on top of that, we layer on any free or paid intel that we can find, right? So there's thousands of, vendor blogs, government certs, people on Twitter who are talking about interesting threats. We want to extract all those. And then we want to look across your whole organization, IPs, domains, hashes, file paths, URLs, email addresses. And we want to very quickly help you answer like, hey, I just read this report. Did I see this in my environment? And then we have an attack simulation on top of that where we can pull down binaries, we can pull down URLs, we can test all your tools against it, we can score your tools over time to give you a scorecard of how specific tools do over time as threats are blogged about in the ether. And then lastly, we provide a unified language where you don't need to necessarily know the exact syntax for your tools. You can just say like, have I seen this IP address, right? Do I have a process running out of temp? is there, tell me about the new Windows auto runs that have been seen across my organization, or Mac auto runs, persistence items. So it abstracts away all the vendor specific syntax, and it just accelerates, new analysts where they don't need to learn, which of the 25 different EDR tools you have. They can just ask their triage questions.
That was a lot to unpack there, so we'll definitely have another conversation on that one, Alex. But thank you. And Jonathan, can you maybe just
So at Silent Push, the core problem we're trying to solve is tracking how the internet's infrastructure changes on a day-by-day basis. And what we do is we collect a massive amount of DNS data, scanning data, certificate data, and we use it for a variety of different things. One thing is we have a threat research team who's producing research using our daily data collection, and also producing these indicators of future attack feeds, very much related to the pre-attack framework that we were discussing earlier, Fayaz. And we provide these for our enterprise customers to be able to block these indicators as threat actors are setting them up. Additionally, we have an enterprise app to allow our users to manage their threat intelligence, as well as to enrich it with a ton of context from across our various APIs. And for myself, I'm focused on integrations and partnerships. I get to work with great companies like StrikeReady, Alex and team, hopefully with Mixmode in the future, really trying to make it possible for users to make use of our data and APIs, regardless of the tools and use cases that they have. That's really our focus at Silent Push.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're out of time now. This is an amazing conversation. And thank you all for joining. And I hope our audience enjoyed this panel. And we'll see you out there sometime. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks a lot.